The Lowe Post is brought to you by Goodyear, helping you discover the road ahead. Goodyear, more driven.
And now, the Lowe Post.
Welcome to the Lowe Post podcast where, it's September 29th and we appear to have reached almost the finish line of the weirdest and most horrible NBA season ever. But we're there. The NBA finals are happening. It does not seem like there will be a quote-unquote asterisk on this title. If anything, there will be a badge of honor on this title. There is no fluky NBA finalists. We have the Los Angeles Lakers, who have been among the two or three best teams in the league all year. And we have the Miami Heat, who have the same 12-3 record as the Lakers in the playoffs. They are not a fluke. They are real. They remade their team in the hiatus. They're playing a totally different starting lineup and brand of basketball. And they deserve our respect. This is not – although they seem strangely at home in the bubble, this is not some sort of like, oh, wow, it's a fluke that they're there. It should be a fun series, I think. And to break it down, as always, who will be on commentary for the series for ESPN ABC, the great Jeff Van Gundy. How are you, sir?
Good. How's everything?
We made it. That hotel background is the same one as the last time. The same art there. It's the same thing.
Room 518. There's no changes here. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, now everyone knows your room number. Kids, like, remember, it seems like 10 years ago where Kyle Lowry told Aaron Gordon his room number at the hotel. So if you want to come get me, I'm in room whatever he said. That's a great bubble moment.
It is. I mean, you see the same people over and over again. So there's no stopping it now.
So this is an exciting finals. I think it's got a lot to offer for casual fans and diehard fans. You know, for casual fans, we have this sort of the Heat reuniting with LeBron James 6 years later, 6 years after he left them earlier than the Heat higher-ups expected he would. I don't really want to get into it yet, but I think a fourth championship for LeBron James changes the ground underneath the LeBron-Michael Jordan debate at least a little bit. And then I just think stylistically, this is a really interesting series. So I'll just put it to you. What's the one matchup or one stylistic question or one strategic question that you're going to be looking at when the ball tips off? We get the first two possessions. We see what matchups the teams are playing, or whether Miami's in the zone or whatever. What's the first thing your eyes are going to be looking to?
Well, I think the first thing is when and if or how long LA stays big. And if they do, how do the Heat match? Do they put Adebayo on Dwight Howard or JaVale McGee, and do they play Crowder on Davis, or do they do it vice versa? And I think that's going to be, really interesting. I think Frank Vogel has really challenging decisions as far as lineups, combinations. I think when they stay big, they play better, and yet, it could change within the series. So that's the thing I'm most interested to see right off the bat.
You just zeroed in on here are my notes. My number one point on my notes is, who does Bam Adebayo guard when the Lakers are big? And I think you just nailed it, and I've been guilty of it too. There's been this rush all season. The Lakers need to play Anthony Davis at center. Anthony Davis is a center. And we saw during the Rockets series, that's what they did. That had a lot to do with the Rockets offense more than the Lakers offense, which I think is why people want them usually to play quote unquote small, which is really just normal. But the numbers do not suggest, and have never really suggested, that the Lakers are any better playing that way. In fact, the Denver series really hammered it home to me. Just the power of their size when they're big. And it hit home to me when they would switch the Murray-Jokic pick and roll out of necessity. They didn't want to do it, but Murray and Jokic are amazing and they drag you into it. And they would have Dwight or whoever on Jamal Murray, which looks like a disaster. But then you have and a guard on Jokic, which is a disaster too. But then you have Davis and LeBron on the back line to rotate, to patrol the rim, to just scramble around. It's like, man, there's no space out there. Like, I think their big lineup, and I think let's start simple. I think Dwight Howard should start. Is there any reason why he should not start in this series?
Not to me, particularly if he can continue to eliminate the foolishness that we've seen too much with Dwight. To me, he's really, over the past 4 or 5 years, it's not that he's injured. It's not that he's not playing the same role. What's diminished him is all the foolishness that's gotten in the way. If he can stay just like playing like good, smart, sound basketball with that physical presence that he did in the Denver series, then there's absolutely no reason he can't play more minutes and keep playing extremely effectively. I mean, I think we can all forget what a great, great player, Hall of Fame player, Dwight Howard has been. And the only thing that's ever gotten in the way is the back injury, no doubt, but also, how he's shot himself in the foot over the past few years, over the ball, whatever got in the way. But I was really impressed with how he played against Denver, particularly in the starting role. And hopefully he enjoyed starting again so much that he'll just do his job and eliminate everything that gets in the way.
Yeah, he has, remember, one of the things about the Mike D'Antoni rumors in Philadelphia that is so interesting is that it was Mike D'Antoni who pronounced when he got the Lakers job that the post-up was the stupidest play in basketball or whatever, which was aimed at Dwight Howard, who I think for a time fancied himself as Hakeem Olajuwon instead of what he really was, which was a super duper Tyson Chandler with, a nice jump hook occasionally over switches or whatever. And in LA, he hasn't asked to post up at all. It's not in the game plan. He has bought in to the role and done it really, really well. The only thing that I would suggest, I think he should start over JaVale McGee. I think he's earned it. I think that's clear. And this gets at your foolishness thing a little bit. The only caveat I would have to that, if you look at the numbers, the Lakers have fouled the most of any team in the playoffs. And the Heat are number one in free throws in the regular season and number one in the playoffs. And if you break it down further, the Lakers' foul rate goes through the stratosphere with Dwight on the floor and is like below lowest in the league with JaVale on the floor. Now, fouls are funny, right? Like sometimes you're like, I'd like my team to foul a little bit more because it shows that we're playing physical on defense. But if you let the Heat's free throw machine, if the Heat are like +5 at the line in every single game, that's how an underdog creeps up its chances from whatever percent you give the Heat to win to a higher percentage. That like Dwight fouls a lot. He's physical, he's big, but like to your point, the silly ones, the ones at half court, the running through screens, whatever it is, like those have to go away.
Yeah, the on purpose foolishness. This guy's a smart player. It's not like he's a guy who doesn't understand or have a high basketball IQ and just because he's unaware gets caught fouling. He makes the foolish fouls, illegal screens for whatever reason to prove a point, or I don't know what goes on. So sometimes he defies his own intelligence with some of the stuff that he does. But overall, I think he's a huge plus. And, you said how much chance do you give the Heat just in general, and it goes up? I think they have a great shot, whether it's 50-50 or they're a slight favorite or a slight underdog. I think you'd be diminishing how good they are just because they were a lottery team last year, and really over since LeBron left. I mean, I think they were 8 games over 500 in those 5 years in totality. Didn't qualify for the playoffs 3 of those 5 years. So, they've been stuck where a lot of teams are stuck in mediocrity, and they somehow extracted themselves from bad contracts into better players and some internal improvement. I'm really impressed with how they, changed their roster after 5 years of mediocrity and came out the other side.
Well, what happened in the conference finals was, the Jay Crowder regression from 3-point line that everyone was anticipating. Well, it happened, and a lot of people were including me, were saying, well, one of the reasons that the Heat are playing at a higher level than they did in the regular season, for all the attention on Jimmy and Bam, Dragic had rediscovered his all-star form, and Crowder was shooting like 45% on 9 threes a game. One of those things fell off in the conference finals, but a third thing kept on going, which is that Tyler Hero made a leap from the end of what was the normal season to Orlando. And the second thing was, look, I may have been, I'm either the driver or riding shotgun in the Bam wagon since last year or 2 years ago. And even me, if you had told me in 2020, Bam Adebayo will be the best player in a conference finals series and it won't be particularly close, I would have said, yeah, that seems a little, like even for me, that seems a little far-fetched. He was the best player in the conference finals and it was not close. And that game 6, you did game 6, right? The closer?
We did them all.
You did them all, right? That dunk he had on Tice when he faced up, looked Daniel Tice in the eye and was like, Grant Williams gave me a little bit of trouble. I'm going through you right now and going to inflict harm on you and your loved ones, and dunked on him and screamed. That was a statement. I mean, it sounds so cliche to say it, but sometimes there are those moments that say, I have arrived. We have arrived. I am a superstar. I'm not just most improved player, cute, borderline all-star. I am a star. That was that moment for Bam.
Okay. All right.
That's it.
Yeah. I mean, that's quite a statement. I don't know if, I think they're really good. I think you're right about Crowder. I think he's going to be open. He shot it so well and then shot it so poorly, and that they were able to withstand the so poorly part. I think it's one of the reasons why they didn't close with him. But in Game 6, to not close with either Dragic or Crowder and have Duncan Robinson, Hero. But someone made an interesting point to me about Hero and Duncan Robinson. They weren't rookies or second-year players, however you view Duncan Robinson, anymore, because they had, like you would have, an off-season. This is really Hero's second season and Duncan Robinson's third season because of, the long break. And they also, it's so many things have to go right, and you have to get lucky, right? So, or fortunate, I shouldn't say lucky. Kendrick Nunn goes from, a shoot-first starter, great story, and then because of his illness that prevented him, they end up starting Dragic, and Dragic coming off, again, he's 34, coming off a long rest, feeling refreshed, whatever it may be, like plays lights out. And it's just interesting how, you have to do things right and you have to get lucky to have ultimate success in pro sports.
Well, to your point also about their closing lineup, another member of that group was Andre Iguodala, who was the headliner in that trade with Memphis. And just until really the last 10 days, it just felt like he didn't really find his footing in Miami. Like it just wasn't but you pointed it on the broadcast a couple of times. There were those 2 games where he played 7 minutes, didn't really come in the second half. And now he's closed those last couple of games. And this shows you the fun you can have with small sample sizes. Regular season, Andre Iguodala, Jimmy Butler, and Bam together. So 3, I don't want to call them non-shooters because Andre is going to have games where he makes 2 or 3 wide open threes, but just say, let's say 3 guys you don't guard out on the perimeter, which is something that Spo has tried to avoid in his lineups. In the regular season, 45 minutes for those 3 together. That's it. Minus 42. Minus a point a minute. In the playoffs, 90 minutes together, plus 60. I know those sample sizes are small. That's a crazy turnaround. And Andre has a long history of guarding LeBron in the highest stakes moments. He's going to have a role in this series, which means that because Butler and Bam are their 2 best players, that trio is going to be on the floor some during the series. And whichever version of those numbers prevails against the Lakers, I think is a big swing factor. But Andre, you've said it. We've both said it. When he makes threes like he did in Game 6, it's like the Warriors. It's like you just lose. Like when he makes those shots, you lose and go home.
Yeah, and he has perfected the art of sort of easing his way through regular seasons over the last, I don't know how many years, where he just sort of meanders through, plays well, not overly assertive, and then he has his moments like he did in Game 6. And it'll be interesting, you talk about him guarding LeBron James. He played a lot of backup center in that, series. So, I think Miami, do they come back with Olynyk? I'm sure they will to some point. Do they come back to none as well? I don't know. But he basically was down to 7 people. He eliminated Eric eliminated Derek Jones, Kendrick Nunn, and Kelly Olynyk after, it was 2-1. And it's just interesting, that he picked Solomon Hill and he picked Iguodala to play the backup center. And they just played with Hero, Iguodala, and very little bit Solomon Hill. Do they stay that small or that, 7-man rotation? I can't believe that to start the Lakers series with that size.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by what they do in the whatever 7, 8, 10 minutes that Bam sits, because they've been plus a lot with Bam on the floor and minus a decent chunk with Bam off the floor. The Olynyk thing is interesting because, it may have to be a thing where if you're going to play him, you have to do it when LeBron is not on the floor, because LeBron is going to go at him every single time in the pick and roll. And the film on that is not something that should be viewed by Kelly Olynyk's family without a lot of alcohol around. But let's go back to the first question, because I want you to put on your coach's hat. If you are Eric Spoelstra, how are you matching up to start games against, let's say Dwight Howard starts. So the Lakers have their big lineup in Dwight Howard and Anthony Davis. You start a pretty small lineup with Dragic, Butler, Robinson, Crowder, Bam. So do you put Bam on Davis and just say, let's keep it simple, we're putting our best defender on their best big man player? Or do you put Bam on Dwight Howard and I guess Crowder probably on Davis?
I'd start with Crowder on Davis, but I'm not going to let Anthony Davis play against single coverage ever. Like perimeter, he dribbles it, we're coming. Post, he dribbles it, we're coming. Like they're limited in their half court offense, and they've gotten some good responses. Like Rondo's played, I think, very, very well, and they've gotten timely performances by a lot of guys. But at the end of the day, they need James and Davis to score, and I'm going to try to take Davis out. And if I end up losing a game or two by the 3, so be it. But I'm not going to lose because he lines me up and he scores over the top.
But your methodology of taking Davis out, at least to start games, is Crowder plus help, not Bam. Bam goes on Dwight.
Right. Yeah, because I need him to play big minutes and be, that main staying out of foul trouble. And I just think their size, Dwight Howard was emboldened at some points against Jokic's lack of physicality, and you just can't get punked by that overwhelming strength. Not that Crowder would, but it's just, to me, it's the size differential. There's going to be some help. There's going to be a lot of help on, when James is attacking or playing pick and roll. You got to have a fighting chance on the backboard.
I surveyed a lot of coaches about this, and it was probably 50-50, but I actually agree with you. I think as sexy as the Bam Anthony Davis matchup is, I think when the Lakers are big, and particularly to start games, I'm starting Crowder on Davis and Bam on Dwight. And you hit on 2 reasons. Number one, offensive rebounding scares me with the Lakers. They're the best offensive rebounding team in the league. And as crappy a free throw shooter as Dwight is, he's going to draw fouls. He's going to get second chances. They're going to turn second chance points into threes. They're going to get in the bonus early if I have 6'6" Jay Crowder on him. The other thing is Crowder's kind of a nasty – he has like that low base, nasty temperament that can annoy a guy like Anthony Davis in the post. He's good at fronting. And the third thing is, you nailed it, and a lot of coaches brought this up, I can't risk Bam getting 2 early fouls. I can't risk foul trouble on him. I'm going to need him at the end of games. He's obviously going to guard AD when AD is playing center. That's easy. So I think, I don't know what Spo is going to do, but I would guess he leans this way, right? That's what I'm expecting when the game tips off.
I think so. And I think, just the way the game moves in transition now, there'll be opportunities or moments where Adebayo is guarding Davis and Crowder somehow, or Butler somehow finds his way to Howard in a transition cross match situation. But I do think, that Crowder will play him. And, I think Miami will, front. They probably front as much as anybody. And then, they'll play some zone, although I think the offensive rebounding in the zone will be a incredibly important component of if their zone is successful, because, it's, their first shot defense against the zone, I bet you, is very good against the Lakers. It's just, that's the second shot defense against coming out of the zone. It'll be a little bit problematic, I would suspect.
Boston, and you were nailing this on the broadcast, Boston solved the zone by the end of that series. I think even some of their misses in the fourth quarter were pretty good shots. Even some of their twos I thought were good shots. Can the Lakers replicate some of what Boston did? Do they have other methods of beating the zone? Like what did they see in that series that they can do? Because everyone is going to say, well, zone's going to work against the Lakers because the Lakers are a mediocre 3-point shooting team. That's ideal for the Heat zone. How do you see them countering it?
I thought what Boston and Brad Stevens did so well was they started to really screen the zone. They screened it early in possessions in pick and roll situations. They screened it early with flare screens, which widened out the two forwards at the top of the zone, which opened up the middle for cleaner looks into the middle. And I think the Lakers won't play with as much movement because I don't think they either want to or can play with that type of movement. But I think they have two huge targets in the middle. Like, to me, if you get the ball into the middle to James or Davis, like Bam Adebayo is going to have to come up, and that opens up the back line for lobs if they're playing big. And, Caldwell Pope is a capable shooter. Danny Green's a capable shooter. So I think if they can get that ball to the middle to one of their two playmakers, they're going to do fine against the zone. And it'll be interesting to see how much Miami does zone. And it's going to be fascinating because I'm fascinated by how Eric has combined old school Heat mentality defensively with new wave Eric Spoelstra like Zen zone, and I find it fascinating.
I love when they go zone just because it's just fun. It's a different game now. I get 10 possessions. The game's totally different. I get to look at how are you going to attack the zone, and they change the way their zone looks here and there. It's just fun to have a little variety. But something else that you brought up, I think, the lob threat of both Dwight and Davis and even JaVale. I think that's a big deal. And Tice did not have that. Tice is like 6'8". He needs to jump, go down, gather the ball. And by that time, there are just arms all around you. Dwight and AD are just going to go up and dunk.
Yeah. I thought actually, though, Tice played really well against the zone the last couple of games, as they all did, I thought. And I agree with you. They had some makeable shots. Their issue was Boston couldn't get the stops that they needed when they went up 96-90. I thought when they did that, they were wresting control of the game. And I give Miami so much credit how they just responded and really just shredded Boston from that point on. But you're right. The lob threat to Howard and to, well, really, like you mentioned, Davis and JaVale McGee, regardless of who's playing center, if they have someone behind the defense along the baseline, the way that they commit up with their back line, somewhat like Syracuse does in their zone, that middle is open. Now, a lot of teams in college They don't care if you throw it in the middle. They're going to say, hey, make that shot. It's fine. We don't believe you have the skill to beat us with that shot. In the NBA, when that ball is being thrown to Davis and to James in that open space to either shoot, attack, pass, I just think it's a totally different equation.
Yeah, I mean, LeBron is LeBron. Like, to pass or shoot or drive. I mean, like, that guy gets one half step, he's at the basket. That's the other thing that's interesting about what to do with Bam on defense in this series is the Heat are, if you look at the numbers anyway, the Heat, if you can get to the rim against Miami, they allow a pretty high percentage in the restricted area. And the Lakers live at the basket. I mean, they are the premier rim attacking team in the league. LeBron is shooting like 80% at the rim in the playoffs or something crazy. If Bam is on AD, yeah, he can help at the rim, but AD spots up a lot when they have their big lineup, and it's a lot of LeBron, Dwight pick and roll with AD spotting up. If he's on Dwight, he's either switching on to LeBron, which is going to be the most fun battleground of the series, I think. Like, if LeBron can get to the rim against Bam, Miami's in trouble. Or he's on Dwight and he's near the basket. I think I want him near the basket just because I need a last line of defense back there that's bigger than Jay Crowder. Because if it's Jay Crowder or Jimmy Butler or whoever, like, they're just going to live at the rim.
Well, I think it speaks to, number one, you can't turn it over against LA because they're such a great quick strike team in transition. That's how they live at the rim. And two, some players' reluctance to help against the Lakers on dribbled penetration baffles me. It's like, yeah, this whole idea of, like, we can't give up threes. Yeah, that's the only shot you should be trying to give up to the Lakers. Like, if they make their threes, you go home and you're going to lose that game. But you're losing if the ball's at the rim. Like, James is not missing, Davis is not missing, the dunks are not missing. And this whole mentality of you're going to take away everything, like, no, you're not. You got to take away something and not give teams everything. And you can't give Davis and James, 14 free throws each like Denver did. I believe it was in game 4. Like, you got to take away the free throw and the layup game. And the way you do that is run good offense, don't turn it over, get back, and put your body in front of the ball and make the ball spray out to the perimeter. If it's at the basket, the Lakers will win in dominating fashion.
Well, the transition thing is obviously always key against the Lakers. I mean, they're looking to run after makes. LeBron is throwing his touchdown passes and all that. I do like, from the Heat's perspective, that, they're a smart, disciplined team with a coaching staff that is going to be at the best in the league at hammering these points home and game planning for them. Spo obviously knows LeBron better than almost any coach in the league, if not better than anyone. The Heat don't strike me as a team anyway that will beat themselves with sloppy transition defense, with guys jogging back, with guys not realizing that it's their duty to be the first guy back, or a guy shooting a 3 and just watching it and see what happened. Like, they don't strike me as, like, if you make 6 mistakes like that in a game, that can swing a game against the Lakers because they're going to turn all of that into dunks. That's 12 points.
Right, and that's one thing. I don't think they'll beat themselves in that way. I think they're too driven, too disciplined. But through all the good stuff that Tyler Herro did in the last game, real ball pressure impacted him, and he turned it over. And it's the turnovers that lead to those quick strike scores that they're going to have to prevent. So I'm really interested about Rondo versus Herro. I really am. How many minutes Rondo's playing? I think Herro has a great game and tremendous confidence, and he's going to have to improve in the ability to take care of the ball. And particularly in this series, he's going to have to be great in all facets. And so I'm really interested if they can, whatever the manageable number is, 10, 12 turnovers a game. If they can do that, I think, they're going to be – I think their movement, their screening, their getting to second and third actions within a possession can pose problems.
Well, it also obviously, that Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero handoff game with Bam, it's obviously designed to prey on the opposing center, right? These big lugs do not want to jump out 30 feet at the rim on Duncan Robinson. And so they're counting on their guards getting over those screens. You play a dangerous game with the shooters as good as those guys. And Anthony Davis, when he's dialed in, can jump out on those guys 30 feet from the rim. He can switch onto those guys. That's one advantage I think the Lakers will have when they go with him.
Yeah, but it's hard the way they do it with off a live ball. And you saw Adebayo, I think it was in game 2 or 3, hurt Boston when they tried to – it's not like switching a pick and roll. Got a live ball, so as the guard is flying off the handoffs, the fake handoff and the keep is exceptionally hard to switch. So I think it becomes more problematic the way they run offense. And like Adebayo's ability to make a shot at 17 feet. So now, the center can't drop all the way back. And his ability, as you mentioned earlier, to go off the dribble. He even shot one in the, down the stretch in that game, going to his left, pulling up a 3-point play off the dribble. So, like all of his stuff that he can now do, coupled with how hard, particularly Hero and Robinson, are willing to move without the ball, I think makes him really, really difficult to defend.
I have to say, Coach, I thought I got irrationally excited about a big man quarterback keeper. I think you get more excited about the big man keeper than I do. It's one of my favorite plays from your days coaching. Was there a big guy who was like that? He was the best at that. Like I love when they do that. Olynyk is actually good at that too.
Olynyk is great at it. Now this is how some new school offense has formed. Like the whole 5 out, and it doesn't have to be the 1-2-2 5 out. They do it when they get Adebayo a wing catch or Olynyk a wing catch, and they can do it even out of the low post where they come, dribble up handoffs. But those two guys are terrific. I think Olynyk came to them with that type of skill.
He did, yeah.
Adebayo, I think, has really developed his skill and his confidence. And they've given him – I go back to Eric's decision to start him over Whiteside back last year in their lottery season as a major component of his growth. Like, yes, it's your time. You're starting. It could have been so easy to ridden that out with Whiteside, who was being paid more, and just kept going with him. And, Eric made, like all great coaches do, he made the hard decision that he felt was best for his team. And I think it's really, really paid off. And I'm also interested, because of the size, do they ever go back to Olynyk and Adebayo? Do they ever play them together again? I would suspect they would at some point.
I think they will. My only quibble with that is I think if you're doing that a lot for rebounding, and Olynyk rebounds like a guard. Like he's not he doesn't box out. So I even think, like, do we see Meyers Leonard again at some point in this series? Because he's big and tough and will box out and will rebound like a big guy. I think that's a lot to ask because he just hasn't played basically since they got to the bubble. But it wouldn't shock me if we saw some Bam Meyers Leonard minutes at some point.
Yeah, I'd miss seeing Meyers Leonard's reactions on the bench though. That's been a highlight of he is such an engaged teammate, particularly for a guy who started earlier in the year. He went from starter to not playing at all, and the way he's handled it, I think he either is a tremendous actor, and I admire him for that, or he's so into the team that he accepts whatever decisions Eric comes up with, and I admire that as well.
I think he's so into the team, and I also think, I know Meyers decently. I think he's also a pretty well-adjusted individual. It's like, I can't control this. I'd like to play. It's not my decision. So I have two choices. I can mope about something that I can't control, or, I have a legitimate affection for all these guys, and he does. Like when I wrote a big story about Bam, he was the most enthusiastic teammate to talk about Bam, maybe. I think he's just like, I'm going to make the best of it. You know, there are people who make the worst of it and people who make the best of it. And he's a make the best of it.
And Miami's had both sides of that. They've had guys who, you know, and recently made the worst of stuff. And now they have a team that, you know, think about it. Kendrick Nunn and Meyers Leonard both started. Derek Jones had a huge impact on their season. All have been pushed to the side right now, and at least for the last series. And I would suspect that they're all ready. They're all ready to go because I think they are as selfless a group as you would see. And, you know, it's a skill in life, but I've noticed it even more in NBA players. I think they're so much better in many ways than their predecessors of being happy for others' success. It's a great life skill that not too many, I think, have in their wheelhouse to truly be happy for other people's success, particularly when it might come at your expense. But I think today's NBA player, you see like a tremendous engagement. We talked about Meyers Leonard. You know, Kendrick Nunn is a rookie. He may not be as vociferous on the sideline, but I watch, like, they're into the team. And that's a good thing.
So are you telling me, like, if I went back and watched 90s, early 2000s Knicks film, mid-90s Knicks film, there's not going to be any Patrick Ewing keepers, like fake handoff to John Starks, Patrick gets to the basket. I'm not going to see any of that?
No, I mean, really, truly, it's, you know, offenses today are so much harder to guard, and the skill level of the players have allowed them. You know, now I think there's some things that were hard to guard back in the 90s that aren't as prevalent today. I think the rules have had an impact on all of it, but like that whole keeper thing, really hard. And, you know, it's not limited to just, you know, one or two guys, and throwing the ball to a big, particularly when you're just playing basketball, not as a set, but, you know, Bam flashing up or Olynyk flashing up or other teams, you know, flashing up and just playing off of that. Harder actions to switch, the high split, hard to switch. So there's a lot of things that are being done now that make it really, really challenging for defenses.
You want to know the best part about college football? Anything can happen as long as you have the drive. Whether you're on the field or on the edge of your seat, Goodyear wants you to embrace the unexpected, to take every epic upset, touchdown, or fourth quarter comeback in stride and let it move you. No matter what the season throws your way, Goodyear is here to help drive you forward. Visit Goodyear.com to find out more. So I want to ask you, go back to something else, because I'm always curious about this with coaches. The make the other guys beat you from three thing that we're talking about with the Lakers. Like, what's the line as a coach between just a practice shot and something a little bit harder than it? Like, you can, I assume, like, you can't even give 30% 3-point. You can't just give them practice shots. Like, if you give Kyle Kuzma 15 feet and unlimited time, he's going to make enough that you're going to lose. So, like, obviously you have to close out to some degree, right? But like, what is the, or maybe you disagree. Maybe you just give them practice shots. I don't know.
No. You're not giving anything. I think what you're doing is prioritizing. So to me, what Milwaukee has done well is teach us all in big samples that it's the basket that matters. And then we're going to pay as much attention to the three as we can, but we're not going to take our eyes off what truly is controllable, which is the basket and free throws. And they teach us that, and we're reluctant learners because we see teams who don't give appropriate help and the ball's at the basket time and time again, or they foul recklessly. But in the playoffs, analytics, you know, I think playoff analytics and regular season analytics are different. And I think, you know, the better teams, and when you're in a series, so you can't be giving practice shots, but it comes back to prioritization. If James is driving to the basket, I know the strong side corner. I don't care who's in the strong side corner. If his man is blown by and you don't help, Well, just put 2 points on the board, and most likely 2 and 1, right? And so that's why guarding the ball is so critical. You have to have guys that can stay in front of the ball. So with Iguodala and with Butler, I think they have a fighting chance to stay in front of the ball. Then you have to decide how you're going to play his pick and roll. And, the drop is good for some things, and yet he can get ahead of steam going and he can see the floor. The trap is good for some things, and yet it opens you up to the weak side and to the short roll. So there's all these things, but it's not about giving or not giving. It's about prioritization. They have to prioritize the basket, not fouling, and then getting, closing as hard as they can to the spot up shooters. And I think particularly Caldwell Pope and Danny Green to start the game, they've got to make them bounce the ball if they can.
Let's zero in on some pick and roll X's and O's because we have you on. We should. Lakers have the ball. LeBron pick and rolls. I think it's safe to say any actions that involve two of Butler, Crowder, and Bam, they're going to switch everything. Those three are going to switch everything. No matter if Davis, Dwight, whatever the case may be, they're switching. So obviously we're going to see a lot of LeBron hunting for Dragic, Hero, the other guards in pick and roll and in various actions like that. How do you see Miami handling that? Because that's going to be, and even how do you see Miami handling that kind of attack?
Well, I think just like the Steph Curry Warrior type of defense, they're going to try to elongate their show, avoid the switch, and I think they're going to do. There's a lot of guys they can hunt: Dragic, Robinson, Hero. Although I thought Robinson defensively really improved throughout the Boston series.
Me too.
But I just think that pick and roll, if Miami gets to that, they can't be afraid, particularly late clock, about switching it and then coming late in a James Harden type of trap late to get the ball out of James's hands and make him throw that thing to the perimeter and then scramble as best they can. I don't think you can let James, dictate like, oh, I'm going to pick on this guy. And if we get a little hesitant show, I'm going to turn the corner. And if they get a switch, we're going to leave them one-on-one. I may have to switch some on that. And then I'm coming to double like the Lakers did to Harden, particularly late in the clock.
Well, I think you just nailed like one of the things that sometimes it's such a basic thing that it sometimes gets a little overlooked in analysis is like the Lakers were super smart about playing to the shot clock against Houston, like using the shot clock as almost something that dictates what you do. Like if you double with 5 on the shot clock, there just isn't time left for anything but one pass and a dribble or something like that. And so you have used the shot clock to dictate to the offense who is going to be able to shoot the ball. And I do think we'll see. And the other thing Miami will do is like, they're very good about, and most of this is about the zone or the discussion of it, but they're very good about keeping you off guard. Like LeBron is not going to know exactly what is coming every single time he calls for Dragic's guy or Robinson's guy to come screen for him. Miami is not going to give him like 3 straight possessions of the same exact response. I mean, you're sometimes at a loss for what you're supposed to do against these apex superstars, like when they're hot, like Donovan Mitchell was and Jamal Murray was. I think mixing it up is like fundamentally number one is like you just can't show them this. It's like 2 times. That's all you get, and then you got to show them something else.
Yeah, people say that a lot, and yet you don't see that a lot. Everybody says that we can't show them the same look, but most teams are pretty bread and butter. They stay to what they're doing. I think that's what Miami does differently. I think the zone and their willingness to zone. Nick Nurse, I think, taught everybody about defensive creativity and about, being okay. The problem with man-to-man coaches, Zach, is that when their man-to-man gets scored upon or their base defense gets scored upon, they say do it better. when their alternative defense gets scored upon, they said, let's get out of it. I knew it wouldn't work, right? Because they're not as committed. Whereas Eric is committed to it. Like when Boston was slicing them up in game 6 in the zone, right? He went right back to it in the fourth quarter, and it was a big part of their run. Whether you thought the shots were makeable or not, he went right back to it. So he didn't have that same mentality like, oh, they scored twice against us in the zone, we're out. No, he I think holds the same standard for their man defense and their alternative zone defense. I think Nick Nurse does the same thing. He played a lot of box and one or whatever he did against Kimba, and didn't, for whatever reasons he came up with, didn't want to play them man to man, and they had been really good all year in the man to man. And I find it, as you mentioned earlier, forgetting what you think about should they have stayed in or more, I find it fun because I think NBA basketball can look very similar for all teams. And when you get variety, it is so much fun to watch, whether it's offense, and now we have some teams doing stuff differently on the defensive end. It just makes it fun.
I also imagine there has to be like a little bit of mental fatigue about, you solve the zone, and there's probably part of you as a player or a coach who thinks, all right, that's over now. Like now we're going to go back to a game that I am familiar with, that Kemba Walker's familiar with. Like I'm going to run a pick and roll. They're going to drop. There's a certain shot diet that I know comes with that. And then you get that for 4 possessions, and then the zone's back, and you're like, oh, I thought this thing was over. Like I got to go back to this again. Like I think there's a certain sort of mental strain that comes with that. I want to flip it over before we let you go. When Miami has the ball, we talked about the DHOs and all that. I suspect LeBron will be on Jimmy Butler a lot. And, Danny Green will get him some. I think we'll see some other matchups. They haven't been afraid to put Caruso on him, which is interesting. But when LeBron's on him, I think they'll probably switch a lot of the Jimmy Bam pick and rolls and live with even Dwight on Jimmy at the end of the clock and say, okay, come at me and take a contested 2. So that brings me back to the pick and roll that really killed Boston, which was Dragic Bam. And again, that implicates a smaller Laker defender, although they start 2 wings instead of a point guard. So even their KCP, if they run Dragic Butler, KCP can switch on to Butler. But Dragic out of Bio is a different animal. How do you see them dealing with that?
Yeah, I think, there's so much triple switching now where, the initial pick and roll is switched, and then if the big rolls down, they try to kick that smaller guy out. And I think you had mentioned this earlier about the Lakers' intelligence defensively and when they came to double Harden. I think it'll be the same thing here. I think they have – well, first of all, Frank Vogel, for whatever reason, never gets the credit due him. And I think it afflicts most guys that ever coach LeBron. It didn't impact Jordan. When Jordan played in one big, it didn't diminish what Phil Jackson accomplished. So I've always wondered why when LeBron wins, they don't give the coach of LeBron any credit. But I think Frank is a tremendous basketball coach with a great demeanor, studies it hard. And I think they'll do things maybe a little different in game 2 than they did in game 1. And he'll search it for what he feels is best. And I do think Jimmy Butler, those pick and rolls will be switched because the only thing you're really concerned with the Jimmy Butler is don't foul him. Don't foul him. And that's harder to do than, it's easy to say, harder to do. And Dragic, I thought, he was good in the pick and roll, but I thought even as that series wore on, I thought Tice did a better job. I don't think the Lakers, particularly with Davis, will be reticent to switch that. Even with Dwight and JaVale McGee, I don't think they'll be reticent to switch that, particularly late clock.
Well, and the Lakers will because of their size, I think they have more leeway than a lot of teams You'll see LeBron stunt off Duncan Robinson, for instance, and get back because he's LeBron James. He's huge and fast. To your point about LeBron and his coaches, the obvious irrefutable difference is that Phil Jackson coached the Bulls, for a long time, and LeBron's coaches tend to change frequently, which I think impacts the doling out of credit. But I think Frank has done a great job with this team. And again, it's tempting to just credit LeBron or AD because they're star players, but they bought in top down to the defensive vision that Frank Vogel had for this team from day one of training camp. I'm working on a story about that right now. And it's the same vision that Frank coached with in Indiana. We're going to hit people. We're going to be big. We're going to smash mouth defense. And, I think everybody deserves credit for that. LeBron has bought in this season from day one. We haven't really seen that from him in a few years. AD, this is the best defensive season of his career. But Frank has to get some of that credit. You can't just give it all to the players, because if they're rolling their eyes at the head coach on day one, it's not going to work. And they didn't roll that. And remember, Frank came into this job. Everyone was, Jason Kidd's over there. Like, this is fraught with palace coup stuff. And Frank came in and said, I'm coaching this job without a care. I'm coaching it my way. And he deserves, if you're doling out the credit, I don't really care about percentages, but just make sure you mention his name too, if you're going to credit people for buying in.
Right. And they're missing a tremendous perimeter defender in Avery Bradley, who opted out. I think you're right about James. Hey, listen, it always starts with the best player.
No question.
And the head coach, the relationship. And the greatest leadership you can show is first to become a follower. So when a great player follows the coach's lead, then they become tremendously powerful together. And I truly believe that you had talked about it, I think, earlier in this, or maybe before. This Laker team has limitations. They're not like this overly talented group, particularly in half-court offense, after you get by, James and Davis. They have some real limitations. This is a different type of LA team. This isn't Showtime. This is like greatness of those two, tremendous defense, which ignites transition offense. They rebound, they play big, and they get timely performances when needed from others. And I think it's been a tremendous story, and one really everyone in the Lakers organization should take great pride in.
Last question, because this may be the last podcast we do during the NBA season, which is somehow still going on. Has there been any further fallout from the Mr. Pickles incident from earlier in the seeding games, when you lambasted Mr. Pickles as an ugly dog? Has there been any further, has relationships been fractured? Has there been any fallout?
Well, the mother of Mr. Pickles vehemently disagreed with my assessment of his beauty. And so too did my daughter, actually. Ooh. My daughter, because she's friendly with Mr. Pickles. And I was just stating what I thought was obvious. That doesn't, I'm not talking about his worth to society or his worth to his mother or his inner beauty. I was just talking about physical beauty. It is one of the ugliest dogs I've ever laid my eyes on. And that's just fact.
Hey, look, if you really believe something, you got to stick to it. And you really believe this. So you got to take whatever fallout happens because of your Mr. Pickles stance, you've accepted it and you're going to live with it.
Yeah, you have to. Like this is what I take my great stands on. Other people are fighting these other battles that are truly, monumental in our society. I, on the other hand, are fighting about the worthiness of Pickles to have his picture put on national TV.
Coach, I look forward as always to hearing you, Mike, and Mark on the broadcast. And if this is the last time we do it this season, thank you as always for your time. I think I saw Ryan Russillo tweet something to this effect during the Boston series. I don't know what the right way to say this is, but people sometimes say, oh, there are too many asides with Mark and Jeff. They're always talking about the old days and this and that. I actually vehemently disagree. I think you guys find the right balance between Mr. Pickles and telling viewers why Enes Kanter's impact on the pick and roll is changing Miami's defense. And you're always alerting, like, first possession of every game, you'll notice, oh, so-and-so is guarding so-and-so. That's a change from game 3. Here's why that matters. So I actually think Ryan nailed it on the head. I think you guys hit the perfect balance, because it can't just be Mr. Pickles all the time, and it can't just be the deep X's and O's all the time. And you guys never fail to entertain me on both levels. So thank you for your great work, and I look forward to hearing you guys in the finals. Same goes for Mark. Same goes for Mike.
Appreciate it, Zach. Take care.